Keep those feet moving is really an inspiration for me, is because when we go through grief, we have a tendency to stand still. We get lost. We look for direction from others. We're sort of in that mindset of don't know what to do next. By keeping those feet moving, you're moving. In my opinion, is motion creates action. Action creates happening. And then when you've got things going on and you're not just standing still, you're going places. And that's important because as you continue to heal in grief, the more activity that you're involved with, the more you're able to heal. And we're not saying forget. We're not saying just to ignore the mourning aspect. Is the moving symbolizes that you're moving through a healing phase.
Hello and welcome to a Father's Refuge podcast. My name is James Moffett, and I'll be your host. This evening, we're joined by AJ Coleman. How are you doing, sir?
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. Please introduce yourself to the listening audience.
I'm AJ Coleman, and it's a pleasure to be here to speak with you all today. I'm a resilience mentor, and I have gone through all sorts of grief, and I speak publicly about some of the challenges that I've gone through, with hopefully providing inspiration for others to carry on their legacy of the grief and loved ones that have been left behind.
Thank you. Yeah. So who were you before your life split into before and after?
Wow. I would say I was a completely different person in terms of owning responsibility in life. As a young guy coming out and just kind of taking the reins by the horns, I felt like I had my whole life ahead of me, and that was sort of free from the responsibilities. And the first time I've ever been exposed to such a tragedy episode of my spouse getting sick, it really prepared me for who I am today. And I never realized at that moment that you really get to see what's alive within you, and you have that drive. And before this tragedy, I didn't think I had anything inside me that would help prepare or propel me for what I would soon later face in life. And where I am today, that's why I like to call myself a resilience mentor, because I have gone through so much that it's almost impossible for me to go back and look to see who I was and say, if that did not happen to me, I can say that I wouldn't be as strong, independent, and confident as I am today.
AJ, can you share a little bit about your grief story?
So my first exposure to really any grief was actually my childhood. And very few people knew about this prior to me experiencing a loss of a loved one. I was born with a hearing impairment, and at the time I did not know growing up that I was mourning the loss of an ability. And back in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation surrounding this type of grief loss. And a lot of times we think about grief is through a passing of a loved one. And as I had gotten older, years later, my wife became stricken with cancer, terminal brain cancer, and was given sort of a small window of quality of life left. And at the time, we had just had our daughter that was born. And here I was managing not only the potential grief loss, but taking everything that I have learned from my childhood and applying it forward to really being a strong, I would say, individual that really took on a lot of responsibilities, not only for my wife, but also for my daughter as well, of becoming a single father after she passed. And when I look back at my childhood, that's really where it all started, was that first sign of grief loss, preparing me for all the things that I would face later on in life.
What was your wife's name?
Her name was Corey.
Can you tell
And
us a little bit about her?
well, if you met Corey, she was the life of a party. Always smiling, laid back, giggling, and just really just coming into any room and just lighting up. She would talk to everybody and anybody. She didn't care who you were, what status you had. And when I first met her, her really personality, she shared with me that she actually had brain cancer 2 years before we met and was in remission and covered it. But the way she described it to me was exactly like her personality. It was almost like a flick of a fly. And it's like, no big deal. I'm good to go. And she just treated life just full of zest and realized that whatever time that she had in life to go through, she was really going to make the best of it. And the impact that she left on me was seeing an individual looking straight in the eye at something so devastating, so terminal, and just living life to the fullest, sharing that no matter what goes through her mind, no matter goes through the system, that she would be okay, and that she wanted to make sure that I was comfortable in anything that I did. I still think about this today when she passed in 2009. We're going on about 17 years. And I still remember conversations with her yesterday. I still see images of my daughter in looking exactly like her mother. It's almost like it was like a reincarnation, if you think. And I think when you look back at who she was and the impact that she left behind, is really the strength that carries it forward. And I choose to mourn, more so celebrate the life rather than mourn the loss of her. And her legacy is what carries me through and enables me to share these great stories of who she is and who she was and the impacts that she had behind.
How old was Corey?
She was 31 when she passed, and I
How
was.
long have y'all been married?
So we had been married for just under 5 years, and we had a whole life ahead of us. We had relocated across country for a career opportunity for me, a chance to really begin life as a newlywed couple. And we thought, how hard can marriage be, right? So right after we got married and the honeymoon, we decided to get a puppy. We're thinking, oh, well, let's complicate our lives a little bit and see what life has to happen. And within the first year of our puppy was actually diagnosed with a incurable, medical, was with maxillary myositis, which is almost like inflammation of the jaw, which required special medication, attention, and most people would put the dog down because of the rising cost and the pain.
Right.
She and I just took it and said, you know what, this is our fur baby. This is who we love. We're going to beat this thing. And I will tell you that we gave her the attention she needed. We gave her all the meds. And that dog, our dog, she ended up living for almost 16 years with the disease. And, just to go back into when we were married, one of the things that was always a concern is whether or not there would be the ability to have children. And when you go through chemo, you go through radiation in any part of the body, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what type of effects are going to be left behind. We consulted with a lot of different doctors and said, she's been post 5 years. What did this mean? And all the doctors said the same thing. The fact that you get through the first 5 years, the odds of anything returning is so remote. I mean, you pretty much beat it. Well, during that pregnancy, something must have woken up the tumor, and that just lay dormant for many years and became very aggressive. And I can't help thinking that our daughter is an angel of some sort, because we were told it would take a long time to conceive due to the medical treatment, and it was almost instantaneously. And if we hadn't conceived right away, I do not know if my daughter would still be here today. because every time, every week that goes by, really my wife's body was shutting down and dealing with the cancer while experiencing the excitement of a pregnancy. So we had our whole lives planned. And when she was diagnosed, she wanted to go back to Chicago. So we relocated back from Phoenix to Chicago so she can be with her family and spend the remaining time with those that she loved in the house that she grew up in. And as a spouse, as a individual, I wanted that for her. And one of the key aspects in any grief is closure. It's how do we close a chapter understanding that we have done everything that we could do to not only give somebody else the ability to live their lives, but knowing for us that there wasn't anything further we could have done any different. So that way we're not looking back with regret, with the sorrow that we could have done more. And that's something that I really take into that mindset on a regular basis in anything I do, is what does this closure look like? Can I do more? What can I do while the situation is going on? Because that closure at the very end is what helps promote healing. And I feel many people just never get that closure part. And that's why a lot of those grief wounds continue to be persistent today.
You know that I lost a 10-year-old daughter to cancer, to a brain tumor. There's two different types of cancers. One was benign, and the other one was way more aggressive, and it was attached to her brainstem.
Yep.
And the doctor said when they did an emergency surgery on her that if she lasted 12 months, that we'd be lucky. So she lasted 14 months.
Same exact scenario. We lasted 14 months too. It was a glioblastoma that we were dealing with on the stem.
So can you talk about the treatment journey and how it affected you on the onset when it first happened and became a reality again? I know that she told you before y'all got married that she had it before and she was in remission, and I'm sure that both of your hopes were really up and hoping that she was beyond that or past it. And then unfortunately it came back. And so how did it affect you personally, as well as how did it affect your marriage?
Well, again, one of the things I loved about her is her ability to take devastating news and spin it in a way that it sounded like it was nothing. I mean, the way she described the cancer before we met, it was almost like a cold, like a little flu bug, right? And she was able to go through it and come out. And I really didn't think about it impacting our marriage because I looked beyond that and looked to see who the person was. And that to me was who I fell in love with. And when our daughter was born, about 2 months later, I noticed that my wife was having some speech slurring one night, and I thought it was just because she was tired. You know, when you're a new mother and with a newborn, your sleep patterns are off, you may not get enough nutrients, and I never thought anything more than she's just probably tired. But as the incoherent continued throughout the evening, I said, okay, well, let's go to the emergency room. Let's go get some blood tests and, we'll get some medicine and you'll be back where you need to be. The doctor comes in after doing a CAT scan and grimly said, you have a very large mass in your brain. We need to move quickly for surgery. And we needed to move you to another hospital that can handle this. And at that moment, I didn't know what to think. It was, at 33 years old, the new father, starting my career, I didn't know. And I'm trying to be strong for her. I'm trying to be strong for me. And all I could think about was, why did this happen? What did we do wrong? to deserve this. Several days later, she went in for the surgery, and the doctor came out after about 6-7 hours and said, we did our best to remove most of it, but we're not going to be able to get all of it, and she'll go through the radiation, she'll go through the chemo. Oh, and by the way, plan on her for about 12 to 14 months of life expectancy. And right then and there, I broke down into tears because I couldn't comprehend what was just said to me. It was almost like a countdown. And every day that you have together really felt like a countdown. And what I learned about hospitals, they're still a very much business-oriented mentality. And they were almost predicating this type of treatment from a profitability standpoint. And there was a drug treatment that she could get into that they thought had high hopes and some success early on in their clinical, but I was told it would exceed the dollar limitations that, of what they can afford or what they can spend in the hospital. And that set me off because you're telling me that we can't do treatment based on money, that we're putting a dollar on life? So the administrator came out and I talked to that into like, well, if you want to pay $10,000 per treatment, we can administer this, but there's no guarantee that you are going to beat this, to prolong this. And at the time, I don't know about you, but something just rises up in you, right? Whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's just defiance. And you're saying, you know what? I don't care about the money. I care about my loved one. And I'm going to do everything I can to put them in a position to beat this. And that's what we did on each treatment that we had. It cost me $10,000. Even though the doctors have all said, you're wasting your money. This is too aggressive. I didn't want to listen to that. So how it changed our marriage, it really pushed us, more so me, closer. When you deal with someone who has brain cancer, their personality becomes a little altered. They may not be the same individual that you married. But that doesn't change who they are. That doesn't change what they can do. And in my personal experience, I wanted to beat this thing not only for her, but for our daughter. Toward the end, I can say this is where closure is so important to me. That despite the terminal, despite all the medicine, despite everybody telling me she's not going to be able to survive, my wife lived long enough to see our daughter walk and call me over the phone to tell me the kid was walking. That's the memory that I take with me every day when I look at my daughter and just, the fact that she got to see her own daughter walk right before she passed. The other, at the end, I didn't know we were at the end. We had gone to the hospital because she was occurring some difficulty focusing and the body was shutting down. As a newborn baby, a year old, I kept my daughter away from the hospitals much because of all the diseases and germs and everything. I didn't want her getting sick, and woke up one Saturday morning at the hospital with her, and I just said, you know what? We're going to bring our daughter Zoe down to the hospital to visit you and just kind of cheer you up. Well, Zoe came down to the hospital with my in-laws and spent a good hour with my wife, and seeing Zoe just kind of snuggle up with her mother was amazing. When it came time, my wife was getting tired. I picked up my daughter, gave my wife a kiss, and we started walking out, and we turned, and I took my daughter's hand to wave, like, see you later. My wife looked at her, not me, looked at her, closed her eyes, and drifted off to sleep. I take comfort knowing the last image that she really wanted was our daughter, and the fact that I was able to give her that memory or that experience it's helped me today not only talk about it, but I can also smile as I share this story because it's so heartfelt that it feels good that I was able to do something, even though it was just a tragic time. But I was able to give her what I call a storybook ending. And those are the things that help anybody who go through challenges, to go through these types of incidences, is how they get that closure, that story. And I I struggled after the passing, just the loneliness, the void, everything. But I had to be strong for our daughter. But it truly did help having that storybook ending for my wife that allowed us to heal.
Amen. So I'm going to ask you, are you a person of faith?
I am now. I lost my faith after my wife got sick, and I was angry. I walked away. Little by little, years later, my faith returned.
I have to say that my daughter got sick as we slowly but surely started coming towards the end of her journey. Initially, we had a lot of hope, and we already knew the doctors had said she wouldn't last longer than 12 months. But we also knew that God is a big God. He's an awesome God. And our prayer and hope was that he would heal her on this side of heaven. And we clung to the idea that Jessica was our own, that she belonged to us. And at some point, I had an epiphany, I guess, and realized that no, she didn't really belong to us. She belonged to God. And it was His will to heal her here on earth or in heaven. And so that realization kind of set in and caused a lot of anger and anxiety and depression and bargaining with God and all the 6 stages of grief. And so when she finally did pass away, I would be lying if I'd say that didn't affect our faith, because it certainly affected the foundation of our faith, right? And my pastor said, a couple of years later or whatever, that he admired the fact that we didn't lose our faith over it. And I was like, well, it got pretty close, but life goes on, and we had other children, and that doesn't minimize the importance of Jessica. It doesn't minimize the love we had for her, but we had to let her go, obviously. And so what did caregiving teach you that success never could, as you look back at taking care of Corey as she was moving through chemo and radiation and all of that?
Well, first I was blessed to have an employer at the time that understood what I was going through to enable me to be there with her for those treatments. And I would sort of work non-traditional hours to try to make up the time. But as a primary caretaker of her, I learned a lot about who I was, in a sense of what I was really made of. Waking up in the middle of the night, assisting her to go to the bathroom. Waking up in the middle of the night because she couldn't sleep because of discomfort, or something was in her mind that she couldn't get out and needed to discuss it with me. As a caregiver, what it is that you're actually, the most important part is how you're spending time together. And just because there was an inability to move around at times because of the chemo, because of where the cancer was sitting, she lost mobility of the right side of her body. So she was confined to a wheelchair for a period of time. Then she had a walker, which was phenomenal, and really pushing her to regain strength. There was no mobility of the right arm, and that was a challenge because, as we realized, especially as a mom, you had to change your daughter's diaper. And she became so good at changing our daughter's diaper with one hand, and I struggled just to do it with 2 hands.
Right.
It was kind of the running joke in the household that who was going to change the diaper, because, people would say, well, AJ, you're going to go change the diaper, right? I'm like, well, not so fast. You got to see this. She's good at what she does. And I think as a caregiver for her, it taught me a lot about give and take, because sometimes you want to step in and just take over. But you also have to realize the human element of things, that they also want to do it for themselves. You want to have them feel good. And at one point, even though she was restricted and was not able to drive, she had this massive desire just to one more time get behind the driver's seat and drive. I took her to a secluded area on the street and had her kind of drive through. And the excitement, the beaming that she exhibited afterwards felt so good. But again, it taught me, as human nature, we're rushing in to do something, to problem solve for somebody else, when all in reality, they just want us to support them and they want to figure out on their own. And finding that balance is extremely challenging, but at the same time, but once that balance is achieved, it's actually very rewarding. And it gives that individual and yourself more confidence to try and take on more challenges on their own.
So how old was your daughter? And what's her name, by the way?
Zoe.
Zoe. How old was Zoe when Corey passed away?
She was just under a year and a half.
Okay,
There
so she
wasn't
was
really
really
much of a memory from a physical
right.
memory. We have videos, we have photos, we have stories, and I made the decision early on to keep her mother's legacy and memory alive throughout her entire childhood. Sometimes she would play the mommy card. Mommy wants me to do this. I'm like, well, mommy told me she wants you to go to bed. And it was, a give and take at times. But Zoe and I are extremely close today. She's, next month, she's going off to college as a freshman. And
Wow.
everybody says, well, make sure you bring Kleenex, make sure you bring, all this other stuff. And I have a little bit of a different mindset to those comments. And I said, I've gone through profound loss where I can't speak to my loved one anymore. But with Zoe, I know I can send her a text message. She'll return my text message. I can do a FaceTime. I can call her. I can talk to her. So for me, that loss of her moving out of the house is a little bit different for us than it is maybe for other individuals who are having their children going off to college for the first time because of the void, of the reaction. So I'm more excited to see her development in college. How is she going to react without dad waking her up every morning and putting her to bed? What kind of things is she going to learn? Is she really going to be able to do her laundry on her own, or am I going to get the call where she wants to send it out, right? These are good, fun things to have. But my thoughts really is because of what we've gone through in the absence of her having a mother, I've had to take on multiple roles. And by all means, a lot of stories we can share of mishaps and challenges that we've had as father and daughter with the mainstream. But we look back at our lives together, and the fact that we are as close as we are now, I think it's a token of really her mother bringing us together, because that's all we had. And we
Right.
needed each other at the time. And that's kind of where that mindset really goes into my everyday. That's why I feel like I'm very laid back. I'm very calm nature, because I've already gone through those challenging moments. And I compare it to that and say, you know what? This doesn't even come close, So what if she spilled, and broke a glass, right? As long as she's okay, I'll clean it up and we can move on, right? Okay, so she broke curfew a few times. But she came home, right? Educate her on why curfew is important, but don't make it such a big deal of it. Then she's going to start withholding information from you. And as a dad, sometimes they tell you a little too much information, things that I'm not really sure I want to hear about it from a dad perspective, but I listen. I don't judge. I nod my head, and maybe I'll walk away, mumble something like, oh my goodness, where did I go wrong with this one?
I think as a father, with your going through the treatment journey and eventually losing Corey to that brain tumor, I would think that would make you more inclined to maybe be a little more protective of Zoe and to protect her and to shield her from some of life's more ugly trials.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think what I have done more so is overcompensate for her, meaning overcompensate when we go to the toy store, right? And I buy a
Right.
couple extra things. I overcompensate making sure that I'm always available for her to pick her up, drive her places before she was driving with her and a friend. There would be going and picking up at the same time. That's where I think the overcompensation part of it is. I think she also understood that, yes, as a protective father, but there was some things that I think she needed to experience on her own with respect, right? But it was more of the overcompensation where it was harder for me to just be more of that. Okay, let it be. It's not the end of the world if she wants an extra set of ice cream at 9 o'clock at night on a school night and
Right.
go into the sugar. That was kind of the overcompensation, knowing that I was going to probably have difficulty putting her to bed 10 minutes after she finished it. But I think that's what makes our relationship special. I think that's where it worked for us. And as a single dad for so long into this whole process early on, I had to find things that worked well for us. And again, knowing that she's going to go down for a nap at 2 o'clock, I don't start taking her out and running errands at 1:30.
Right.
I was strict on keeping a set schedule, but keeping it flexible in case something else came up. But I will tell you, I probably still overcompensate her today. Well, I let her get away with things, and
I
sure, one of my fondest memories of being with Zoe is our ability to just sit and laugh and talk about really meaningless things. And we traveled a lot together. It was important for me to not only have a companion in a sense, but show her different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and hopefully just kind of educate her on what it's like to be a child, what it's like to be in our situation, and some of the more interesting stories that I can share with you today is my profession is more into the anti-money laundering, counterterrorism, and I do a lot of work with the banks and tracking down criminal activity that passes through. So early on when my daughter was young, she wanted to know what I did for a classroom assignment. So I went through this whole entire detail of what it is that I do, the importance of what is happening. And I go to her open house for school where they invite the parents in and to see all the artwork, see all the teachers and see the curriculum. And I see Zoe writing on the wall and I'm taking a good quick look. And I'm a little mortified because what I read is that Zoe wrote up a whole synopsis of me saying that my dad for a living washes money. When it when it was really is the anti money laundering.
right.
But for her, she thought I wash money. So this explains why everybody in the classroom in the school were avoiding me for the first part of this open house at school because they thought I was involved in illicit activity. And I had to explain to her after that night that what it is that I do and you have to be very careful. And the other funniest memory that I can tell you is when she was in kindergarten. Kids at the school, they have like little cards that they can swipe for lunches as part of their meal plan. And I couldn't understand why her meal plan was like resetting every other day. And this is like $100 here, $100 there. And
Wow.
finally I get a call from the school and it says, Mr. Coleman, we need to talk to you about your daughter. And I'm thinking, what now? It's not even the first week of school is completed and we're already having an issue. Your daughter is buying lunches for everybody in the school and charging it through your account. We need to inform you that this probably isn't what you wanted her to do.
Right.
So I said, no, we need to put a cap on this right away. So that night I sat her down and I said, Zoe, And that's do the same thing when I go, walk me through this. Why are you buying lunches for everybody? You're in kindergarten. You've got fifth graders at your side. You've got third graders. You've got
Right.
first graders. And she said, Daddy, you buy lunches and dinners for your friends and people, so I'm going to do the same thing. And that's when I had to educate her on the importance of generosity and finding a balance on
Right.
it's okay to spend money for you, because if I didn't do this, I would probably have gone into significant debt just by funding everybody's lunches for the next 10 years. But it's great rewarding stories that we have that we share with each other that makes Zoe and I as close and dynamic as we are today. And at some point when she goes off to college, hopefully the light bulb goes on a few times and she'll think before she reacts. But I think deep down she knows that Dad will always be there for her.
From the mouth of babes, right?
Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of, where we get into some pickles as father and daughter is it's the spending, it's the what we do and the professions of what we do for a living. I think she still tells that story and has to remember to put the anti instead of the
Well, I bet.
coming up. But it's what makes our relationship fun, dynamic, and
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
we smile.
That's wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
So why keep those feet moving instead of stay strong?
Keep those feet moving is really an inspiration for me, is because when we go through grief, we have a tendency to stand still. We get lost. We look for direction from others. We're sort of in that mindset of don't know what to do next. By keeping those feet moving, is you're moving. In my opinion, is motion creates action. Action creates happening. And then when you've got things going on and you're not just standing still, you're going places. And that's important because as you continue to heal in grief, the more activity that you're involved with, the more you're able to heal. And we're not saying forget. We're not saying just to ignore the mourning aspect. Is the moving symbolizes that you're moving through a healing phase. And that helps you with your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, and in case your physical well-being because of how you interact. And that's where to keep those feet moving is that we just don't stay in one place. We just keep going. And it's okay to mourn the loss, but don't take the loss and turn it into a lifetime of mourning. Instead, take that loss and celebrate the life, celebrate the legacy.
So what advice about grief frustrates you the most?
The most frustrated part is the why phase. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to us? Why now? Why not later? And a lot of times during that why phase, you're not looking at it and saying, is there a divine reason behind all this? And I believe through my own faith in recent years that our entire lives is one big test. And if you pass little series of tests, you move on to the next phase. That God would never put us in a position that we truthfully can't handle. We may not understand today. We might not understand tomorrow. But through healing, through inspiration, motivation, through these type of podcasts and having your listeners listen to you, they're able to heal. And when we become stuck talking about the why, that's really frustrating because every setback is an opportunity for us to move forward to do something. And if you would have talked to you yourself 20 years ago, you would never have thought about the podcast. But the work that you do is so meaningful and inspiring to helping your listeners grieve through their own process, and you bring in on individuals such as myself to help contribute. There is a divine purpose. And again, we may not like what happened. We may not understand it. But when you no longer question the why and you turn it into where am I going? Where do I go next? That's the opportunity that we have to make a full impact.
So I guess what I was looking for, what advice did you receive from other people about grief that frustrated you?
Okay, well, that's a different.
We
I
got a
think
lot of
people.
advice.
I think people watch too many movies and shows where people believe that you're supposed to act a certain way, you're supposed to grieve a certain way, and I think that's frustrating because everybody's different. And there are those that have sudden loss, and there are others that have more of an expected loss. And even though they're too different and nobody has the exact same pathways, I think it's frustrating that people think like, okay, well, it's, 9 o'clock on this day. You need to feel this. So if you're out there and you're just enjoying yourself for a few moments, people like to remind you, well, aren't you grieving? Aren't you taking some sort of loss? And I think that's more the frustration is because people assume they know what's in your best interest, even though they're not in the exact same type of a position that you are. Everyone's different. Everybody has their own process on how they handle it. What works for one person may not work for another.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I heard that was the most frustrating is people that I guess in their minds they think after 6 months or a year or 3 years or whatever, it's like, get over it. You're supposed to get over it. You need to get over it and move forward. And it's like grief is not something that you get over.
Hmm.
Grief is with you all the time. And we learn how to live with that grief. And at the outset, the triggers come fast and hard, right? And the emotions just overwhelm you and they can cause a lot of problems. I mean, a lot of people just want to curl up in a ball and put a blanket over their head and just stay in bed and just cut themselves off from the world because it's painful.
It
And
is.
and so there's a pendulum that swings from one side to the next, and we have to find balance in how we get healing and in how we. I always tell people that don't suffer in silence. Get help. Call 211. Talk to United Way. Tell them what you're going through. They will put you in contact with many times free resources that are available to you in your community. Go to church and talk to somebody in pastoral care. Talk to parents. Talk to brothers, sisters. Just talk to somebody, and don't suffer in silence. So
And I think a lot of that's really talking to where we are today with society, right? I mean, today, society's a little bit more open to accepting those that may have some emotional or mental concerns and provide necessary resources where I know from my parents' age, even when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, there weren't a whole lot of resources with this, and it was
right,
sort of a taboo to even talk about your feelings. And if somebody were to seek some counseling or a third party to help cope through some of the challenges, people look at it and say, what's the matter with that kid? What's the matter with that person? So I think we benefit today much better than we did years ago, where people accept it and are more nurturing involved because you are absolutely right. Holding it inside doesn't add any value. And sometimes finding that release enables you to really go through that mourning process into the healing process.
AJ, you wrote a book, right?
I did keep those feet moving.
Keep those feet moving. Where can people find that?
People can find that on Amazon, just under the same title, Keep Those Feet Moving, AJ Coleman. I also have a website called Keep Those Feet Moving where I post various blogs and the various podcasts, but I'm always available to chat and help others and really help inspire those that may be going through whatever grief that they go to share encouraging words.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story about Corey and Zoe and all of that. I'm sure that's going to resonate with some of the listening audience.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been
Yeah.
enjoyable.
So, in this heartfelt episode of the Father's Refuge podcast, AJ Coleman shares a deeply personal journey that transformed his life after losing his wife Corey to brain cancer while becoming the sole parent of the young daughter Zoe. AJ opens up about navigating unimaginable grief, overcoming anxiety and isolation, and discovering that healing isn't about moving on, it's about moving forward with purpose. Through his Keep Those Feet Moving philosophy, he offers practical encouragement and hope for fathers and anyone facing life's most difficult seasons. This conversation is a powerful reminder that resilience isn't the absence of pain, it's choosing the next step, even when the path ahead is uncertain. So if AJ's story resonated with you, talking to the listening audience, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a father, friend, or family member who may be walking through grief, loss, or a difficult season. Your recommendation could be the encouragement they need today. Be sure to subscribe to the Father's Refuge podcast, leave a review, and follow us for more conversations that strengthen fathers, families, and faith through real stories of resilience and hope. And if you'd like to learn more about AJ Coleman or pick up a copy of Keep Those Feet Moving, you can go to keepthosefeetmoving.com. Every step forward matters, and sometimes the first step begins with hearing someone else's story. And so to the listening audience, I want to say thank you for the privilege of your time. And AJ, thank you for sharing your story of Corey and your daughter Zoe.
Thank you. Thank you again for this wonderful
Yeah.
opportunity.
And glad to have you. And to everybody listening, we'll say we'll see you in the next episode.